My name is Brenton Simmons, and I feel the need to introduce myself, even though this is being posted on my own channel, because this is something very different than I've ever done before. And quite frankly, it's very uncomfortable for me. But that's actually the point of what I want to talk to you about today, of stepping out of our comfort zone, stepping out of the cave we've created for ourselves. I'll talk more about that later. And stepping into growing and becoming the person we know we're capable of being, who God has designed us to be. But before I do that, I want to pray. You might already be turning the video off, but I need God's help for this, because I am not a pastor. I'm just a broken man who has gone through some difficult things in life, had some difficult things happen to me that have caused me to, for a long time, be very angry, anxious, depressed, fearful. Caused me to use coping mechanisms like substances to make myself numb. It's caused me to buy into the mindset that through performance I needed to obtain or achieve certain success or have certain materialistic things to prove myself, my worth, not even just to other people, but even just to myself. And all I want to do today is talk about what's helped bring me out of my cave, rather who has helped bring me out of my cave, what that means, what that looks like. So please have patience with me. This is very new to me. Dear Heavenly Father, God, I pray that you'll speak through me in this message. God, I hold this notebook in my hand. And the cover of this notebook is of you running after one sheep, and that you would leave the 99 or the rest of the herd to go after one sheep. And God, that's my heart and the mindset I want to keep as I make this video or future videos, is that you will speak through me, give me the words to say, so that if just one person who watches this or hears this, that it will change their life or bring them to you, then it's completely worth it. We trust you and thank you. I pray that you prepare the hearts and minds of the people who do watch and listen to this to understand what I'm saying and hear you speaking to them through me, that it's not me. In your name, amen. I meant what I said in that prayer. I need God to speak through me, because I really don't know how to do this other than just to, I'm gonna have my notes in front of me. I'm not gonna be very polished. I'm just gonna speak from my heart. I might be a little jumbled, but God has really done a work in my life through very difficult circumstances, but it's been through those difficult circumstances that he's been refining me, stripping away my pride, and helping me to learn where my identity comes from in him. And so the name of this message is called Stepping Out of Your Cave. My wife gave me this little notebook, and I felt like this is the perfect place for me to write my notes, because it helps me stay in that mindset of, this is all about if just one person hears this and it helps them, that if what I've gone through in my life could help that person and give them hope, as it has done for me, not because I have it all figured out, or I'm, some professional life coach or mental coach or counselor or anything like that. This has been all through very painful and difficult trial and error, and God healing me and walking me through these things, that I'm stepping out of my cave to share this with you today. So that's what I'm titling this, is Step Out of Your Cave. So where I started with this is I asked myself these questions. So I'm going to ask these questions to kind of prompt your thought process. And that is, what has happened to you or in your life that has killed your confidence, that has brought you down, that has caused your depression, that has killed your hope? Who are you, and what are you capable of? What do you first think of? If it's negative, then what has happened in your life to kill the way you view yourself? What has weakened, if not killed, your faith? Who God is, his promises, what he's already done. What lies have you believed and allowed to sink in? And as a result of things that have happened, something someone said to you, something someone did to you, or something someone never said to you, I love you. How many kids didn't hear their parents say, I love you, or at least hear them say it enough? Or maybe they said it, but their actions didn't show it. Or a spouse. What is something that someone did to let you down? What consecutive chain of events have happened in your life that makes you feel like things are always going to be terrible? It's never going to get better. There's nothing to live for and nothing to hope for. What are you afraid of? Can you identify your fears and where they come from? I mean, I'll be honest with you right now. I'm only halfway through this first page, and I already feel like I'm doing a terrible job. I feel like I'm jumbling. I feel like I'm not speaking clearly enough. I feel like I'm not going to be able to pull this together to get my message across in a way that you understand or even makes sense. And so that even right now, the enemy is trying to feed me lies to shut me up and turn his camera off. But I'm going to keep going. You might not keep watching, but I'm going to keep going. So when I said at the beginning, step out of your cave, what I mean by your cave is the summation of the things that I just talked about, the terrible things that have happened in your life, the lies that you believe, things people have said to you, all those things. The summation of those things are what have put you in your cave. And what do I mean by your cave? It's a hiding place, coping mechanisms, anything we look to for comfort other than God. The coping mechanisms of substance abuse, addictions, those are kind of the obvious ones. But let's talk about them for a second, because a lot of us deal with it, including myself. At first, or have dealt with it, at first, we go to those things because they do provide comfort. They actually do provide escape. They numb our pain. They make us feel better, make us forget about things. They allow us to escape. But if you've experienced that, then you know over time it doesn't help anymore. Because in order for it to make you feel how it did in the beginning and help you the way it did in the beginning, you now need to consume or use more in order to achieve that, until over time you find yourself in the place where you have an addiction that no longer even brings you peace, that actually gives you anxiety and negative effects if you don't have that substance. And sometimes even then when you're on the substance, it still doesn't provide the escape that it used to. So it's a perfect example of something that you run to comfort, but eventually ends up being a trap. Some of the less obvious ones, I guess this one would be kind of obvious because you call people a workaholic, but there's something noble in working hard, and there is, but when it becomes an escape, meaning all you do is work, you stay at the office or your job later than you have to, or you take other jobs, or just anything you can possibly do to keep yourself working and busy even though you don't need to, because you don't want to have to face yourself or reality, or you don't want to go home. Caves can look like material success. It could be a hobby. It could be a car. It could be working out. And some of these things sound like great things, but in a minute I'm going to explain why we can't run to those things for comfort without God, and that is because there is no peace in comfort without God. What do I mean by that? Constantly choosing comfort eventually leads to restlessness. So I'll give you some examples there. I already gave you the substance abuse example, because you choose that comfort enough times in a row, you now have addiction, and now you're in a bad spot. That would make sense. That's easy to follow. But let's talk about work, or your homework if you're a student, or the gym or your practice if you're an athlete. It might feel good the first day, maybe even the second or third day, to push that work off, to not work out, not do your homework. But over time, you continue to make that choice to procrastinate and to push things off. You end up finding yourself in a place where you don't feel at rest, because it no longer feels like a rest anymore, because you're not working, you're not doing the work. So it's not a rest. This has become your new normal. And then instead of finding yourself in a place of relaxation or comfort, now you find yourself in a place of stress and anxiety, one, under the guilt of knowing you haven't been doing what you're supposed to be doing, but more than likely, your work or responsibilities have now stacked up to the point where you have your back against the wall, and you're under more pressure than you would have been in if you would have just done the work in the first place. So it's another example where comfort in the beginning, if it's something you continue to choose, ends up being a dead end or a trap that makes things worse. Okay, we're like, well, what if it's a hobby? Like for me, I love playing golf, or you name it, it could be anything, driving, tennis, whatever. Chess, building model cars. The reason why that we can't choose those things to be our comfort instead of God is because those things can be taken away from us. I'll give you an example. I remember one day I was on my resistance bike, and so I was watching a documentary to pass time, and I was wanting to get off that bike. I was kind of in one of those mindsets, like, why am I even doing this? What's the point? You know, I knew the point, but I was just complaining, having a bad attitude. And I was watching this documentary about these athletes, and this guy was an Olympic swimmer. He's like 6'5", good looking dude, great shape. He was an Olympic qualifier. And he had an incredible career ahead of him, at least that's what everybody felt and thought based on his ability and what he'd even done so far. And one day he's on a subway car with his friends. He's wearing a watch. He's just standing there. He's not being an idiot. He's not goofing off. He's not doing anything dumb. He's just standing there. And somehow the current, the electrical current from the subway wire picked up on his watch. And that electricity traveled from the subway wire to his watch into his body and blew his legs off. And in an instant, that man went from an Olympic athlete to someone with no legs. His whole life changed. If he had found his identity and his comfort and his ability to swim and being an athlete, it was all taken from him in a moment. I know that seems dark, or it seems maybe over exaggerate, but it's the truth. You could get in a car wreck today, tomorrow, and you're not able to do the things that brought you peace and comfort. But the thing is, with God, when you learn how to find your peace and comfort in Him and from Him, it's somewhere that it can never be taken from you. People in concentration camps, people in horrible accidents, people in horrible scenarios. God still can't be taken from you because He's in here. Once you've given God your life and accepted Jesus as your Savior and He lives within you, no one can ever take that from you. And that to me is true freedom. Because if we find our peace from something that can never be taken from us, then what can the world do to us? Our caves don't have to be secluded. For some of us, our caves allow us to hide in plain sight. For some of us, our caves allow us to hide in plain sight. What does that mean, Brian? If this hits home for you, you know exactly what I mean. You ever been in a room full of people, but still felt completely and utterly alone? Most likely it's because you feel or fear that if you allow the people in this room to see you for who you really are, instead of the facade that you've created, or this fake identity that you've created, that you would be judged, rejected, and abandoned. And so even if they are accepting of you and they do like you right now, you feel and know that they like you for who you've portrayed yourself to be to them. So even right now, you're not at peace because you don't feel truly seen. So where freedom lies is on the other side of vulnerability. It's a risk, but it's a risk that's worth it, because when we allow others to see our true selves instead of this shell or fake persona we put on, we'll really allow them to see us for who we are, our fears, our shortcomings, our insecurities. And we're accepted instead of judged. We're loved instead of rejected. That's where we feel the true freedom, because we're truly seen and accepted for who we are. Now, you might find that there's a lot of people in your life that if you are your true self, that they do reject you and they do judge you. But those aren't the type of people that you're necessarily going to want to spend your time with. People who love God and really do love you are going to love and accept you for your true self. And you won't have to put on a fake persona to be accepted. And there's freedom in that. So that's what I mean by you can hide in plain sight, because if you're super successful or really charismatic or you have an infectious personality, even though you might be miserable on the inside, you can hide. A lot of us do that. I've done it. For some of us, our caves are obvious. But for some of us, not so much, because we like where we're at. We like where the world has us positioned right now. We're comfortable, and our cave has a great view. So what does that mean? You have a great job or a successful business, so you have a lot of resource, you have money. You're really good looking, so you get a lot of attention. You're very talented, physically gifted, so again, you get attention or opportunities. In our world system, you're thriving. You still might be miserable on the inside to an extent, but because you're getting this validation constantly around you from what you have, what you drive, what you're known for, your fame, your talent, you might be in a cave and not really realize it. There's something, if you really were honest with yourself and took a really close look at how you really feel, that you know there's a void, but you fill that void with these coping mechanisms. And it's weird to call what we think as of positive things as coping mechanisms, but anything that allows us to stay busy and distracted and focused outwardly instead of what's really going on in here and having to face and sit with ourselves. That's why we want to be busy or distracted or on our phone or constantly entertained, because if we have to sit with ourselves, we're miserable. We don't want to do that. We don't want to have to feel. So we numb and distract. Those are coping mechanisms. So how does that person ever realize or identify their cave? There's a couple good options, and hopefully that's how it happens. That's how I want it to happen for others. That's how I wish it would have happened for me instead of the hard way. They either realize it through a heart after God, seeking it out. And that one, you're like, what does that look like? Well, oftentimes when people are materially blessed, it's easy to slip into, God's proud of me. He trusts me, so he's given me these things. That's prosperity gospel. Yeah, those blessings come from him. But the question you should be asking is, what does he want you to do with them? It's not just about you. If he's blessed you with resource or attention, a platform, what are you doing with it? Instead of just being comfortable and focusing on yourself. It's easy to just become self-absorbed without even realizing it. Being in your own little bubble, never worrying about what's going on in other people's lives. You might say, well, I am a nice person. I care about other people. But do you really sacrifice and put others first? That's what a heart after God could reveal to someone who has a comfortable cave. Or someone lovingly helps them see it. Someone they trust. It's like, hey, look what God's been doing in your life. And instead of just sitting in your beautiful home and driving your fast, fancy, awesome sounding car, what if you got out of your comfort zone and started helping other people? What if you started focusing on other people's needs and loving them well and telling them about God, which is extremely uncomfortable, instead of just staying in this little bubble that you feel God has blessed you with? They could listen to a message like this. But more than likely, this is most of us, it takes a storm. It takes hardship. It takes those things that have made us feel comfortable and successful, and loved, and important, to be stripped away so that we can realize that what we found our identity in this entire time is not what makes us us. Who or what do you run to when adversity hits? When you go through that season of stripping, of scarcity, of that job being taken from you, of that relationship failing, of that good health going away for yourself, a family member, loved one, what do you run to? If it's anything other than God, that's your cave. And again, it might be things that seem like they're good options, but if it's anything other than God, it's a dead end, because anything other than God can be taken from you. And you're just chasing your tail. You're going from one good thing that, okay, this was taken from me, I'm having a really hard time about it, so now I'm gonna go to this to make myself feel better. Well, this can be taken too. So instead of finding a firm foundation to stand on and build on, you're just going from one thing to the next. And the more talented you are and the more resourceful you are, the more things you have that you can go to fill those voids, more opportunities that you have. And even though that person, if you're looking at them and you say right now, why are they so lucky? Why does, like, I try to do the right thing, I try to serve God, and they keep getting all the breaks. If you really see this through the right perspective and the right lens, you won't look at it that way anymore. You actually see them that they're lost. You won't envy them anymore. I don't want to say you pity them, but if you have a heart for them, you'll actually have empathy for them, because you realize those things that seem so good to the world and the people around them are actually what are keeping them stuck from finding the truth, from stepping out of their cave. They don't even know they're in the cave. The enemy wants to keep you stuck running to something or trusting in something, someone, even yourself, that can't save you. He wants to keep you running to those different things instead of clinging to God. Comfort can't save you. So maybe your storm is really a blessing instead of a curse or bad luck or punishment, because it identifies your cave that you didn't even realize you were in. You never would have seen it until that storm came and shook your cave. I'm going to give you an example from the Bible about a man named Elijah. We're going to talk about how to get out of that cave. And again, forgive me, I'm not a pastor. I read about Elijah, and so I'm trying to regurgitate what I took from it, what I learned from it. And I've heard some pastors talk about it, their take. And so I don't even have my Bible in front of me, so I'm just going to talk about this from my recollection of reading the story. But Elijah was a prophet. He was a man that God would speak to. God would speak to, and he would ask him to give these messages to the Israelites, because the Israelites had been turning to idols and turning to things other than God for comfort. And because of that, God was warning them that it was going to be to their demise. But if they would turn back to him, that he would save them. And so Elijah was constantly trying to teach these people and spread this message to a lot of people that didn't want to hear it because they were comfortable. And so at that time, a very popular idol or god that they served was Baal. And so Elijah and these priests of Baal had this scenario where they said, all right, we'll settle this of whose God is real and most powerful. You're going to set up an altar, Elijah, and we're going to set up an altar. And whoever's God brings fire down and consumes the offering, that's whose God is real. And Elijah was so confident that God was going to show up for him. And not for him, but even to show up, God would show up for himself to reveal his glory, to show that this false god of Baal was just that, a false god, and that these people had been seeking a dead end. And that's what Elijah had been warning them about. Then Elijah upped the stakes. He said, not only is it going to prove whose God is real, but the loser is going to be burned on their altar. He was willing to stake and wager his own life because he was that confident in God. And sure enough, God comes down with fire, and all the priests and everything are trying to go through all their rituals, trying to get Baal to show up. Elijah's even taunting them. And Baal never shows up. God does. And so there was a crowd of people watching this take place. They didn't have social media or news channels or phones, whatever. They didn't have a way for it to spread like it would today. But it was such an impactful, powerful moment that it did spread quickly over word of mouth. And it got back to this woman named Jezebel, who was a queen at the time. I think she was a queen. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But her husband told her about what had happened. Jezebel was an evil woman. And Jezebel said, tell Elijah that by this time tomorrow, he's going to be dead. So that word gets back to Elijah. And even though Elijah had just been so confident in his God that he staked his life on it and then saw God show up and come through, when he heard this, that Jezebel said he would be killed by this time the next day, he ran hundreds of miles to a cave to hide. Now let's think about this. He didn't get in a truck or an ATV and speed off into the desert to go to this cave and get there in a couple hours or the day or whatever. He had to travel by foot or on the back of an animal. And to go hundreds of miles took him more than a day. So as he was still running, the deadline of when she said he would die passed. So what was Elijah really afraid of? I think initially, yes, he was afraid of what she said. But I think really what it was, and I've heard a pastor's take on this, the real lie that he believed was that he couldn't keep fighting the fight anymore on God's behalf. That he was alone. He didn't have any more energy. And God had shown up in this powerful way in front of all the people. And what did it get him? Got him a death threat. What was the enemy trying to do? He was trying to kill what Elijah had just done in God's name. And it tried to push him into a mindset of doubt and disbelief to shut him up. And it worked at first. But here's how cool this is. So he's going days and days. I can't remember how long it took him to get there. He travels hundreds of miles and he finds this cave and he lays down. And I heard something really cool that a pastor gave from a perspective. Imagine putting yourself in God's shoes there. And I don't mean to say this disrespectfully, but like in that sense, God and Elijah were partners in that moment where Elijah said, God's going to do this and he's going to send this fire down. And God showed up. He did his part. His power was shown. He came through for his partner Elijah. But yet when Elijah heard Jezebel say, you're going to die, instead of trusting in the fact he just saw his partner come through for him, he ran. He skipped town. And it's just like what the Israelites had done that Elijah was trying to speak and prophesy to, because God had shown up for them time and time again, where he split the Red Sea. He gave them a pillar of fire to follow. He gave them food from the sky. You can just go through example after example, but then they would still complain. They still would try to turn to idols to try to give them what they wanted because they wouldn't put their trust in God. And he just did the exact same thing, even though he's supposed to be his prophet. But when God first visits him in the cave, instead of chastising him and saying, hey man, what's the deal? Like, I showed up for you, you ran. What's wrong with you? He doesn't do any of that. He gives him grace and he feeds him. Elijah wakes up and there's food there. And so Elijah eats and he rests. And what does he do? He travels even further away and finds another cave. And he lays down in that cave and he feels sorry for himself and he feels safe. How many times have we done that when something bad happens? It kind of sounded crazy before, like to hide in your home and not really go around people or ever see people or interact with people before, like you call them a hermit or whatever, like that was kind of a rare thing. But now that we've been through COVID and had quarantine, a lot of people do that. And with today's technology of delivery services for food, or you just go to the grocery store and they drop the groceries in the back of your car, everything can be brought to your home. You don't have to interact with people. So there's a lot of people who rarely ever interact with anyone else. They stay in their cave because they feel safer, they feel comfortable, and they feel like as long as they stay in there, they can protect themselves from all the fears and lies that they've bought into. So that's what Elijah's doing. So now God comes to him and he says, Elijah, what are you doing in that cave? What are you doing here? He asked him a question. Elijah sits there and he says, I'm all alone. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired out. I'm the only one that fights for you. And God says, Elijah, go to the opening of the cave. I'm going to pass by. So Elijah he goes to the opening of the cave. God sends down fire. He sends down a storm. He sends down wind. He breaks rocks in front of him, puts on this marvelous display of power. And then God says to him, Elijah, I'm not the storm. I'm not the fire. I'm not the rocks, but I control all of those things. I am with you. Get out of this cave and go do what you know I've called you to do, and I will give you the power to do it. It's not about your stamina. It's not about your ability to do what I'm asking you to do. I'm going to do it through you. You just have to keep trusting me. And that's exactly what he's saying to us. But because Elijah had allowed his feelings to set the stage for the enemy to use his lies to lead to paralysis, to hopelessness, and to giving up on what God had called him to do, he was ready to just sit in that cave and give up. He started focusing inwardly instead of trusting in God. So many of us do that. I've had so many friends I've talked to that are trying to come to God or get their life right so they can get God in their life. You hear so many people say that. And it's like you're envisioning yourself here and God's here. And you're saying, somehow I gotta like meet God in the middle by, kicking my addictions, being a better person, whatever you want to name it. and then, I feel like I'll be ready to meet God here. But that's not how it works. All you have to do is open the door here, and God bridges the gap. And then he helps you through those addictions. He helps you become a better person. He helps you heal your wounds. Because when you're trying to quit those addictions and you're just thinking, I can't do this anymore, I can't do this anymore, it makes it harder, it makes it worse. The way that we start becoming a better person, the way we start letting go of those vices, the way we start focusing on others and becoming selfless is because not out of guilt or even responsibility, but because we love God. And the more we love God and learn about God and want to be more like God, that's when we're able to start letting go of these things out of love for him, not out of condemnation or us having to fix ourselves or get ourselves right so that he will love us. He already loves you. He already loves me. We're not auditioning for the part. We already have the part. He created us perfectly, exactly the way he made us for a purpose that he has designed us to fulfill. But we allow the lies of the enemy and the things that have happened in our life, the hardships, to put us in a cave. So we stop looking to him and asking him, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with the abilities that you've given me for you and for others? And instead, we're trying to make ourselves feel better all the time. How many people do you know? And this is myself. I'll use myself as an example. When I had gone through some very difficult things in my life, financially, relationally, I got to the point where I wore this chip on my shoulder. These family members died, or this thing happened to me when I was young, and all these things have happened to me, and why has it happened to me? And I'm so angry. I was so angry. And even though I didn't want to be self-centered and self-consumed, I was, because I just kept focusing on this chip that was on my shoulder that I carried with me all the time. It put me in my cave. I got to the point where I didn't want to talk on my platforms or to other people because I already felt like I was taking enough arrows and shots from around me that I didn't want to put myself in a scenario where I would get more attacks. I didn't think I could handle it. I got to the point where I wanted to numb myself out all the time so I wouldn't have to feel. But that hurt the people around me. And it wasn't until I had someone lovingly tell me, Brenton, unless you stop focusing on your pain and your wounds all the time, then you're going to end up causing pain to the people around you that you love the most, because you're going to be always so focused on yourself. You're not going to be able to be the person that they need and love them well. And I actually had to sit on the floor when they told me that, because it hit me right in the mouth. Because I knew for so long that even though I desired to be different, I had been self-absorbed because I couldn't let go of my pain. I had to give it to God, and I had to allow him to start healing me so that way I could let go of the performance anxiety that I had of feeling like I had to be the best to be loved. I had to have or drive certain things to be seen as successful or important or respected. He started stripping those things away from me so that I can learn that my identity is in him. It allowed me so that way when I would train in the gym, I wouldn't train angry anymore to make myself this hard, tough, intimidating person who was so emotionally broken that I wouldn't feel pain. But what I also didn't feel, and I still felt pain, but I sold myself short in feeling the emotions and love that make life worth living. When we shut ourselves down so much emotionally that we think we're going to protect ourselves from more pain, so we stop taking risks and loving others and being in a relationship or showing others love first, we miss out on so much. And even when something bad happens, even though we've made ourselves hard, we still feel the pain. We just have missed out on the beauty in the process. And you might be saying right now, okay, Brent, but, I don't know about this whole God thing. And, I've had a lot of bad things happen to me. And a lot of times when I try to do the right thing and be selfless and do things for other people, it's not reciprocated. And I'm hurt. I've been hurt time and time and again. And that might be the case. but it's because we live in a broken world. And if you really think about it, if that group of people that you're referring to listened to what I'm talking about right now and actually applied it, those things wouldn't happen anymore. Love is the only thing that can penetrate those hardened walls of hate, prejudice, fear. That's love. Love is the only thing powerful enough to allow someone to actually open up, trust, and be healed, is because they have experienced what they've always been looking for to fill that void. And that's God's love. And that's God's love through us for each other. So what was the lie that Elijah believed? We talked about it, how I said Jezebel was going to kill him. That's the obvious one. And then we said it was really that maybe he couldn't fight the fight alone anymore. But then allowing the enemy to feed his mind with these lies is what made him stagnant and got him to shut up for a while. It got him to stop doing the things God had asked him to do. So in what ways have you allowed yourself to give up, to become paralyzed, not doing what you know God has called you to do? Okay, and now let's play advocate again, because this is me. When I struggled through this, I pushed back hard. I was like, all right, God, if you love me, if you really love me and you're real and you're there, just give me a sign. I would ask for, something that was just undeniable, just because I just needed something from him to be like, this is real. This is as real as the pain I feel. This is as real as the anxieties and the depression and the fears that I face every day. I need something from you that's just as real as what has got me into this situation. And I would also think about, okay, I haven't heard from you of what you've asked me to do. You haven't written it on the wall for me. You're not telling me what to do. So how do I even follow you? I don't know what you want me to do. So when I say in here, how have you allowed yourself to give up, to become paralyzed, and not doing what God has called you to do? You might not know what God has called to do. You're just like me. I don't know what he was calling me to do. And it wasn't until I just finally gave it all to him. I said, all right, I'm not going to carry this burden anymore. I'm going to give you all my pain. I'm going to give you my identity. I'm going to give you my faith. I'm going to actually believe this. And it's not because I need, some tangible sign or something for me to grasp onto. I'm going to trust that if I really start reading your word, reading the Bible, praying to you, fortifying my mind of your promises, that you're going to heal me enough that I'm somehow, some way going to really know that you love me. And what I learned through that process is that our mind is like a battlefield. And if you're not strategically, intentionally taking ground or defending ground on a battlefield, then the enemy takes ground from you. You lose ground. And that's the way your mind works. I learned that if I wasn't intentional every single day about what my thoughts were, about what I believed about myself, what I believed about God, that I would automatically go backwards and feel negative and feel depressed and feel anxious and feel fearful. And so I started being extremely disciplined about what I allow myself to listen to, what I allow myself to watch, to look at on social media, the thoughts that would go through my head. If it was something negative or fearful, I would kill it and replace it with, no, I don't believe that. God loves me. God's not going to abandon me. He's going to take care of me. And it was through this process that God started to open my eyes and reveal to me how I had been looking through such a lens of skepticism. And what I mean by that is I'd be asking God to show me something and speak to me. I want to hear you. Just talk to me. Why can't you talk to me? I mean, you talk to these guys. Why can't you talk to me? But I would read a devotional with my wife, or watch a sermon, or listen to something, or someone say something to me, and it would be directly applicable to what I was going through. And my wife would look at me and she'd say, "Did you see God speaking to you?" But in those moments, because my faith had been so wounded and broken by my life experiences, and I felt like I needed something more tangible, I would look at those things through a lens of skepticism, and I would say things like, "Babe, that pastor that gave that message, or the author that wrote this devotional, they wrote it in a strategic way that they know people are going through hard things. So when they read this, it's going to be applicable to a lot of people." And even though it had been so spot on, ridiculously applicable to my situation that couldn't have been the case, it's still how I saw it. Because it was easier for me to believe that it was coincidence that had been strategically done by some human motive to make money or sell books than it was to believe that God was speaking to me, because my faith in God was broken. And over time, as I kept continuing to seek him, learn about him, something that really helped me is I used to always view God as harsh. Almost like this angry old man, that he did love me, he created me, he was powerful, but like I was a little kid, like pulling on his pant leg, being like, "Hey, pick me up, pay attention to me." But he's just like, no, you got to go do something to get my attention. Do something great. And then it helped me when I finally realized that, when God sent Jesus to die for us, to save the world, to give us salvation, he did it so perfectly that also at the same time, Jesus was an expression, a physical example of God's nature. They are the same. And I know that leads into a whole nother thing that's hard to understand and wrap your head around, that God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit are all one. And even if you take a deep dive into it, it still can be confusing, requires a lot of faith. But when I started seeing Jesus and God as the same, and that when I looked at Jesus as this loving, perfect, sacrificial, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do," even as he's being killed, he's praying for the people that are torturing and killing him. My heart always just if I watched The Passion of the Christ or whatever I would watch, that would just rip my heart out, because what kind of a person could be being tortured and praying for the people that are torturing him? And it made me love him and look at him in such a beautiful way. But I'm like, he is God, and he's the expression of God's love, and that is God's nature. And so I started seeing him a little bit differently, that he actually does love me. And then I had something really cool happen. I think I have this book here somewhere. My wife was looking for a book in our house. She wanted to find something she had read before. So she's tearing the house apart. She's ripping out anywhere that a book could be in our house. She's tearing that up, looking for one. And I'm sitting in our living room watching a game or something. And she comes in the room and she goes, "Hey, what's this book?" I looked at it. I was like, "I don't know. It's not mine. Never seen it." So why? She opens up the front. She says, "Your dad's name's in here, and his phone number." I said, "Let me see that," because my dad died 7 years ago. And I look at it, and sure enough, it's his handwriting, his name, and a phone number. And I'm like, how did we get this? And why is his phone number next to his name? Was he giving this to someone? And so then they'd have his number if they wanted to talk to him about it. And if so, how did we get it? How did we get it back? But I was like, I'm going to read this. I don't think this is a coincidence. Even though I'm skeptic, I don't think this is a coincidence. I'm going to read this. And it's this book called Crash the Chatterbox. And it's an entire book about rewiring the lies that you've believed about yourself for so long, for the reasons that I've been talking about, and replacing them with God's promises and how he really views you. And it was exactly what I've been going through and fighting. And she finds it in the bottom of the closet with my dad's name on it. So I read through the book. Like, I couldn't get enough of it because it's helping me so much, to the point I've been reading it over and over again. Still going through it again. You can see where my page is marked. And this was like been 2 months now. And it wasn't until the other day that I called my little brother. We were talking on the phone, and I told him about this. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I know about that book. Dad bought 100 of them because that book helped him so much that he gave them out to people because he knew it would help them too. And then he put his phone number in there so they could talk about it." I didn't even know. 7 years after my dad had died, I ended up with this book when I needed it the most. That's God. I can't deny that. Even as much of a skeptic as I want to be, I can't deny that. That's God speaking to me. So even though he doesn't show up and write something on the wall for me or speak to me audibly, he does things like this. That's how God speaks to us. And he shows us his love. I wanted a hug from him. I'm like, just somehow give me a hug. I want that embrace to feel loved. Because that's what I need. I need that love. I need to feel like I mean enough to you that you love me and that you want to hold me. But the way that we experience is when God works in one of us enough that we've healed enough and believe how much he loves us, that we step out of our cave and start taking risk of loving others well. And then when we experience that love from someone else, that's God loving us through them. Especially when it's in beautiful circumstances that don't even make sense, where that person has no reason to love you. Whether they don't know you or they do know you enough to know how broken you are and how messed up you are, but yet they still keep giving you grace. And there's no strings attached, because that's what that's what we look for. Is like, okay, what's their motive? What do they want from me? Where's the string attached here? But they just keep loving you, keep asking how you're doing. They keep showing up for you, trying to help you. That's love. That's God loving you through other people. So you might say, okay, I see how Elijah got out of the cave, but how do I do it? God isn't showing up with fire and earthquakes for me, but he's doing things just like this that he did for me, and he'll do it for you. I don't know how, I don't know when, but if you keep pursuing him, he will show his love to you. And that does not mean that you're going to get a promotion. That doesn't mean you're going to get money. That doesn't mean you're always going to be healthy. That doesn't mean any of those things. Because I used to use those things because some of the stuff that I was taught when I was a kid, that's how God worked. And if things weren't good, then you must be doing something wrong. No. When bad things happen, it's not God punishing us. There might be some circumstances where God's trying to get our attention, but God still loves us, and he wants to help us through those things. We just have to first start killing the lies and replacing them with truth and his promises, so we can actually see the work he's doing all around us, in us, and what he wants to do through us to help others see the truth and step out of their caves and experience all God has for them. I use myself as the example again. I've been uncomfortable the entire time I've been filming this video. I'm doing this on my phone. I don't have a videographer. I used to have a videographer and do all kinds of different videos if you look up the channel. And so a hurdle I kept facing right now is, well, I don't know how to do this right. I don't know how to capture this right. And even in this moment, I don't know if on the other side of that screen that my phone timed out. So between me wondering if this is me talking to myself again, because I already ran through this once a little bit ago because I'm nervous to do this and thought rehearsing it, I actually feel like I did better earlier than I am now. And in the meantime, probably every 30 seconds as I've been talking, I've been getting these thoughts in my head like, why are you doing this? No one cares. Your story doesn't matter. Just turn the phone off. But that's the enemy trying to put me back in my cave. I was in my cave for so long. I just keep asking God to show me where my pride is, where my fears are, and what I need to trust him with, so I don't go back into that cave. Because the minute we start thinking, I've got it figured out, I got this God thing figured out, I got my life figured out, you're going right back in the cave. You're slipping. Even from a non-biblical, non-Christian, non-religious standpoint, if you ever at any point in your life think you've got it all figured out, you don't have anything else to learn, you're slipping. We can always learn. And in this scenario with God, there's always something that he can teach us, show us, more that we can learn about him. So before I close, I do want to pray. I want to pray that if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, that this will soften your heart and that you'll at least give it a chance. Just like me, I've gone through phases in my life where I didn't want anything to do with God at all. Because when the bad things happen, I'm like, if you really love me and you're a good God, then these things wouldn't happen. But we live in a broken world, and he loves us so much. Think about that. If you have a child or a son, that you'd be willing to sacrifice your child to save someone else? I'd sacrifice my own life for you. I've never met you, but I would sacrifice my own life for you. But I don't know if I'd be able to sacrifice the life of my child. But he did that for us, and he loves you. So you give it a chance. And there's something I want to say real quick before I do pray. And I know this is already really long, and I don't know even if it's still recording. But I would have conversation with my atheist friends. And we'd be talking about where we all came from, where the world came from, how we were created, what happened. And whether they talk about evolution or the Big Bang Theory, and I'd be talking about creation, that God created us. No matter which way you look at it, no matter which theory you go with, whatever belief you have, it still requires faith to believe what you believe, because it's not like a mathematical equation that you can just see that adds up, that makes sense, that like it's there. There is no theory or ideology that it's just proven fact and that we're ignoring that and choosing to believe that it's God. Every single one, no matter which one you pick, requires faith. So if you have to use faith to make a decision, why pick the ones that have no hope, that have a horrible ending, instead of the one that has hope, that actually has an ending where you're surrounded by love and you no longer have to suffer? I got so caught up in trying, because I wanted to make my life better, and I did care about other people. I had a good heart that I wanted to try to teach other guys and other people how to make this life better. And there's some good in that, but it's not the full picture, because this life is only temporary. And where I was missing it was that my focus should have been on sharing God's love with them and the salvation message, so that way they wouldn't be lost and that they could be saved. And that if I actually loved them, then I would do uncomfortable things like this, stepping out of my cave, taking a risk, and talking to them about something that's very uncomfortable about, like their faith. I just butchered that. So even right now, my insecurities are plaguing my mind. Like, you just sounded like an idiot. But what my heart's trying to get across, and what I'm trying to say, is that if you love someone, it's worth the uncomfortable conversation to talk to them about their faith. Because there is a heaven and a hell. And heaven isn't just some place that you go when you die. A part of that is also when you accept Christ now as your Savior, he lives within you. And he helps you as you live in this broken world. You don't have to do it alone. The lone wolf mentality that we see on social media that's preached everywhere, be hard, don't care about other people, focus on yourself, is that exactly there. It's a self-centered ideology that keeps you in your cave and keeps you from ever experiencing God's love or loving other people well. It makes you self-centered, and it's never, ever going to bring you peace. Might bring you some worldly success, because that's what a lot of these guys have achieved by teaching that, but it's never going to bring you peace. Because there's this lifelong journey, and I know I'm going long, there's this lifelong journey that people will go on to try to achieve a certain success, a certain amount of money, a certain lifestyle, and it's very hard to achieve that, so it keeps them on that journey for a long, long, long time. And if they actually ever have the opportunity of ever experiencing it, then they realize that they're still empty, They're still miserable. There's still something missing. And now they're even worse off and more miserable because they realize they wasted all this time trying to find it, to then ultimately realize once they got what they thought was going to make them have peace and make them happy is empty. And now what do I do? We don't have to go through that whole charade. God wants to enter your life now and start healing you and rewiring those lies and thoughts in your head so that you can start living a life in freedom, living a life of peace, of knowing that you were created exactly the way you are. You're not a mistake. If you've made mistakes, that doesn't define who you are. You aren't the mistake. You made a mistake. You're not the mistake. And some of those things have lifelong consequences, but that still doesn't make your identity. Yes, there are repercussions for our mistakes, but you're still loved. You're still accepted. You can still have hope, and you can still love others well. That's a lie a lot of us buy into, is I can't love others well. I'm too selfish. Well, when God heals you enough and you stop being so self-centered, you can start loving others well. That's a choice. But you got to let him to start doing the work within you, and it's uncomfortable. Trust me, I know. And so God's saying that. I just want to say, Heavenly Father, I pray that somehow, through much as I probably butchered what I was trying to say, that someone watching or listening to this doesn't know you, God, that he or she will give you a chance. That they will open that door and accept you and ask you into their life so that you can start to heal, change, and grow and mature them, God. And that they can start stepping into the person you designed them to be, to love others well, to be selfless, and to be at peace. I pray that you'll help those right now, God, that are hurting, that are anxious, that are depressed, that are stressed, that are sick, that are lonely, angry, broke. This is a hard world we live in. And God, I pray that they'll stop turning from the things that are just quick fixes and coping mechanisms they think are going to bring them peace and comfort, and start turning to you instead. And that you will meet their needs, God, that you will show up for them, and they'll experience your love, and that they will walk with you for the rest of their lives. In your name, amen. If you're still watching at this point, thank you for your patience with me. I'm going to continue to release messages like this, and it's never going to be about my ability to come up with something to say. It's really me saying, God, what are you doing in my life that you want me to share with others? And if I took you through all the things that's been happening and what he's done in my life, this would be hours and hours long. So there'll be other opportunities and other messages where I'll be vulnerable, because I'm trying to do exactly what I'm saying to you. Practice what I preach. I guess I'm preaching. I have to be vulnerable, because on the other side of vulnerability is freedom. Being truly seen, accepted, and loved just the way I am. Just the way you are. You are loved. I love you. That's why I'm doing this and making myself uncomfortable doing something like this. And God loves you. And he's loving you enough to put people in your life who I know are going to love you in a way that you will experience his love. He's done it for me, and he can do it for you. I'll see you in the next video.